Hello friends, welcome back. We are discussing Domain 2 asset security, and in this video we'll be discussing about data roles which exist in an organization, and we'll discuss about security baseline including the topics like scoping and tailoring and what is the difference between them. So let's go straight into the drawing board and see these concepts in action. Now if you look into here, first I will start this discussion with the data classification process. The data classification process, if you look into it, I'm explaining this before explaining what are data owners, what are these data custodians and administrators and other things. But to understand this classification process is very important, and we should always have this process in our mind whenever we are thinking of the data classification, right? So data classification process starts with criteria which are set for classifying data. We have to set different criteria for different type of data we have in our organization. Now those criteria are set, data owners are established for each type of data, that who is the data owner of different data types which exist in the organization. Senior management is the overall responsible authority who will make sure that identified data, classified data, they have the corresponding data owners or not. If they don't have corresponding data owners, then the classification process is flawed. Now in step 3, data is classified, right? So first step was that criteria are set for classifying data, then data owners are established for each type of data, then data is classified according to the criticality and sensitivity, and the criticality and sensitivity part will come as a criteria. Like the first step criteria will talk about the criticality of data and sensitivity of data, and second step will talk about that these data are related with HR, finance, business processes, trade secrets. So those kind of thing will happen in the step 2. Step 3, the data will be classified as confidential, not confidential, secret, top secret, that kind of thing. Now in step 4, required controls are selected for each classification. So the controls are going to be selected that, okay, this type of data is always at rest, and when the data is at rest, in which security zone it will land to and what all encryption will have. So those kind of consideration will be at step 4. Then baseline security standards are selected for the organization, and based on that baseline we will go next step, which is scoping and tailoring. Now based on the baseline, controls are scoped and tailored, which is the next step. Then controls are applied and enforced, and then access is granted and managed. If you look into here, step number 1 and 2 is basically done by the people who are the ultimate owner of the organization. Step number 3, 4 and 5 are basically data owners. Now in some cases, a small company, it's not only about a small or big company, but in some type of company, data owner and the organization owner can be same. In some company, the organization owner, like the board of director and CEO, can delegate the responsibility of data ownership to some other people, but this delegation has to be documented and approved by senior management. Now the data owners will, in theory, they will execute step number 3, 4 and 5, and step number 6 to 8 will be done by administrator and custodians. Having said that, let's look into the different data roles we have in the organization, and you will see here it's a long list, but the corresponding NIST documentation, if you want to refer, and I will encourage everyone who is preparing for CISSP to refer NIST documentation. It's good to have a printout if it's not too bulky, and use the old school traditional method to mark important points. Now here, the NIST documentation which talks of data roles is NIST SP 818. This is one important document. Now this document will tell that what all data roles can be in an organization and what they are supposed to do. It is not that every organization has to 100% comply with that definition. There is always a scope of a scoping and tailoring which will alter this definition depending on the organization's need. Now, first role is user. I don't know where I have. Yeah, here is the user, right? The user or subject. So GDPR defines data subject as a person who can be identified through an identifier such as name, ID number, or other means. So that's the user. The role of user is like the ultimate person who is the consumer of some kind of data, right? Either the consumer of some kind of data or his data is being consumed in some process. So this is the GDPR definition, that it can be identified through an identifier such as name, ID number, and other means, right? After the user, let's discuss a bit about administrator. Who is an administrator? An administrator may be a data custodian or someone in another data role. Administrator have the rights to apply the permission to access and handle data. So this is something which like these words like permission to access and handle data actually separates it from a general user. A general user is just a business user or a general public or anyone. But an administrator is one who is having some sort of administrative access over the data. So that's an administrator. And sometimes administrator can be a data custodian as well. A data custodian may have admin right that will make him as an administrator. Who is data custodian? Data custodian basically are the people who are delegated by data owners. So data owners delegate day-to-day tasks to data custodian. They do business as usual activity like data backup, maintaining audit logs. Typically, system security admins are also data custodian. The data owner, this is the big responsibility. So organizational owners or senior managers, which is ultimate organizational responsibility of data, like CEO, president, department head. So these are the data owners. And if a company CEO thinks that he's not, he's not, due to some reason, if he thinks that he don't want to own the data, the CEO can delegate the data ownership task to another person. It could be some asset owner as well in some situations. So data owners identify the classification and ensure it is labeled. So if you go into the classification process, so this step, data is classified and required controls are selected. So this talks about this role: identify the classification, ensure it is labeled, ensure adequate security controls are there. And these are the four key points NIST SP 818 outlines what are the responsibility of information owner or data owner. Information owner and data owner are the synonymous terms. Sometimes it is written as information owner, sometimes data owner. One of the same thing, but data and information is not the same. Data is in a literal sense, in literature, data is just a set of information, and the information is really the piece of data which make sense or which is required by some type of user. Now these are the four responsibility. One of the responsibility is to establish the rule for appropriate use and protection of the data of the subject or data or information, which is called rules of behavior. Provide input to information system owner regarding security requirement and controls for the information system where the data information resides. I have seen a question based on this this point, that who provides input to the to the system owners in data classification process. So it's basically data owners have to come up with the kind of controls they want for their data, right? They have to be aware of all the privacy laws as well and all the regulatory laws, plus what is required from organization to safeguard the data. They have to decide who has access to the information system and with what type of privilege or access rights people will use to access this data. They have to assist in the assessment of the common security controls where the information resides. So these are the responsibility, high level responsibility outlined in NIST SP 818. Now, data owners and asset system owners could be the same person, as I explained earlier as well, that sometimes The data ownership is delegated to system owners. Now, who is system owner? Again, NIST SP 818 outlines responsibilities for information owner. So this responsibility, we should know it, and we should have this sense developed with enough reading, that if question comes and we have to find that this responsibility should be with system owner or data owner, then we should appropriately identify it. Questions may come based on these classifications, responsibilities, so please be very mindful of these terms. So who is a system owner? System owner is a person who owns the asset or system that processes sensitive data. It could be the lead of network engineering, the lead of security engineering, or Windows engineering, Linux engineering, whatever you can think of in an organization. Those the people who are actually ultimately responsible for the information systems or information asset, they are the asset owners. What are the responsibilities outlined? They develop a system or security plan in coordination with data owners, the sysadmins and functional end users. After consultation with everyone, they develop the security plan. A system owner can't develop a security plan in isolation, because the system owner has to address business need, and he has to be mindful of the users as well. He has to come and devise a security plan which fulfills both the domains. System owner maintains the system security plan and ensures that the system is deployed and operated according to the agreed upon security requirement, which is very obvious. Ensure that users and support personnel receive appropriate security training, right? So security training responsibility is with system owner, right? Who is the ultimately responsible for security training? Senior management. But who is responsible for the specific security training for the security assets? It's the system owner. So they ensure the users and support personnel receive appropriate security training, such as instruction on rules of behavior or acceptable use policy, right? So they have to, if they are issuing laptops, they should issue a document saying that what is the acceptable use policy for the hardware or the software and internet. They have to update the system security plan whenever a significant change occurs, assist in the identification, implementation, and assessment of the common security controls, which will be the part of security baseline, I think, right? Now, business mission owners are basically the program manager and information system owners who own the business. Like, think of a telecommunication organization. So there will be a person who is responsible for the billing of all the users. There is a person who is responsible for the brand management, or maybe there is a person who is responsible for the talking to the shareholders. That is CEO basically, or board of directors. So those are the business and mission owners. It is quite possible that business and mission owners are the same people who are the data owners, and in a very small company all these three roles can merge, which is very unlikely, but in theory, yes. Now there are two more roles, which is data processor and data controller. This is more relevant into the into the cloud environment, which is more in news, more in people are after COVID pandemic, people are more savvy towards migrating things to cloud. So the data controller and data processor, these two terms are basically put forth by GDPR regulations. So GDPR defines data processor as a natural or legal person or public authority or agency or any other body which processes personal data solely on the behalf of data controller. So data controller is the owner of the data who controls the data, and processor is the delegated authority who is actually doing some sort of data processing for some type of business, right? So this hierarchy we should have. The controller is the higher hierarchy and the processor is the lower hierarchy. Again, data controller controls the processing of data. It's a company who collects employee data, is an example of data controller. And data controller is the ultimate responsible person for any data breach. So data processor may have some penalty, but the ultimate responsible is data controller if there is a data breach. That's all from the data roles. Now, quickly, I will cover security baseline. Whenever we talk about security baseline, I think our attention goes to a disk image, right? And that's not wrong. So having a disk image, let's consider a Linux. No, Linux is not the ideal fit. And let's consider a Windows workstation. So Windows workstation can be, every workstation will have some security setting, but if we want to make it uniform and efficient, we make a disk image and we deploy that image everywhere. And that image will have the minimum security controls that is required by the company to be followed in end user segment. That is a security baseline, right? Now, if this security baseline computer is allocated to an end user or an administrator or a database processor or a network engineer, they may have different requirements, and based on the requirement, the tailoring and scoping of that baseline can be done to fit that baseline for that specific user, right? So here I'm telling, explaining the very high level hierarchy. First we make a baseline, then we do tailoring, and then we do a scoping, right? From a project management point of view, or the people who are project manager, they will think, how come tailoring is first and scoping is second? Isn't it like we make the scope of the project first and then we do anything else? But not, just hold for a minute. We are talking CISSP here. In CISSP, definitions are a little bit different. We do tailoring first and then we do a scoping. I'll explain what's the difference. But here in security baseline, if you look into the drawing here, so I have already explained NIST SP 853 in domain 1. This is basically security and privacy control for information system and organization. This can be treated as the information security control document for an organization. It mentions security control baseline, identify them as minimum security controls. Minimum security controls defined for an information system. So that's NIST SP 853. It has the definition for security control baseline. That's why it's referred here. Now NIST SP 853B, there is NIST SP 853A, that is the assessment of the security controls for a company, which is not mentioned here. But if you refer my old video where I discussed about risk management or security risk controls, episode number 39, 40 and 41, I think, in domain 1, you will see the explanation for NIST SP 853 53A. Now here we will talk about NIST SP 853B. And what is B? It's a control baseline for information system and organization. You can relate B with the baseline, A with the assessment, and if nothing is there, it's just security control in security and privacy control, right? So here it is, control baseline for information system and organization. It presents 4 baseline based on the potential impact to an organization mission: low impact, moderate impact, high impact, and privacy control baseline. So these are the four type of baselines NIST SP 853B talks about. Going into the details of these baseline is not the scope of CISSP, but if you want, you can go and read more about it, and that will give a kind of confidence, and it will make you more knowledgeable in that area. But for the sake of passing CISSP exam, you should only know that there are 4 categories of baselines, which is low, moderate, high, and privacy control. That is the subject of NIST SP 853B. Now, when selecting security controls within a baseline or otherwise, organization need to ensure that the control comply with external security standards. This is very important. That if we are selecting some baselines and we are doing scoping and tailoring, we should be mindful of the regulatory requirement. We should be mindful of the compliance requirement, internal security controls which we follow in the organization, plus legal requirement. So all these four requirement has to be catered while we are selecting or tuning or scoping security baselines, right? Now coming to these two critical terms, which is tailoring and scoping. What is tailoring? Tailoring, before I explain tailoring and scoping, I will tell you how to memorize this as a concept. So T is for tailoring, and you know, you can have word tailoring and tuning together in your mind. So T is for tailoring and T is for tuning. So tailoring is basically assigning different values for a control. It's like, you know, if you turn on the radio AM and FM channel, you move the knob of the radio, and when you move the knob, you come across different AM and FM radio channels. So that's tuning, and this tuning is called tailoring, right? So tailoring and tuning goes hand in hand. It's assigning different values of a control. You are not selecting a different control, you are not adding a control, you are not subtracting a control, but you are assigning different values of a security control. That's called tailoring, or you can say tuning, right? Tuning in your head, but when you speak, you say tailoring. Now scoping, so S is for scoping and S is for subtracting, right? So scoping is basically removing controls from a suggested baseline, right? So if you received a security baseline which talks about a lot of things about facility management or building management, but your company is operating in a way that all the data is in cloud, so are you going to consider those baseline controls for a company? No, because those baselines controls are not relevant to your company. So you will basically scope them out. This is the word we use, scope them out. So scoping is subtracting. You're removing the security control. So whenever you hear the word scoping, it means you are removing some of the security controls and you are making the scope of security controls in a baseline in alignment with your company. When it is it's about tuning, it means you are assigning different values, like different encryption values, different key size. Excuse me. So this is called tailoring. So this thing is actually explained here, that tailoring is modifying the list of security controls within a baseline to align with the organization's mission, right? Modifying is like assigning different values. Now, what it entails, it's identifying and designating common controls, applying a scoping consideration. This is also very important, that scoping is coming after tailoring, right? So we tuned and then we remove some of the, when we are tuning it, then we can say that, okay, if in the cloud environment we have this value, but if we are going in on-prem, we are not considering this, we are removing this. Or otherwise, like in on-prem, we are going to have a specific integration, a specific MD5 authentication, but when you're going to cloud, we are going to have much higher encryption or something. So that is a scoping consideration. Selecting compensating controls is also part of tailoring if the existing controls are not sufficient enough. Assigning control value, as I said, tuning, assigning control values. Scoping is a part of tailoring process, right? And refers to reviewing a list of baseline security controls and selecting only those controls that apply to the IT system you are trying to protect. I think this is very comprehensive enough, understanding, and you will not miss any question if this understanding is understood in a proper way, right? That's the end of most of the topic in domain 2 except security operations. I think I have to make a couple of video on security operations, but before I go there, there is a little bit of thing we should know about asset management, that we can have tangible asset and intangible assets. Configuration management system actually talks more about tangible assets, and yeah, the RFID tags and all, we all know that. Barcode management, I think all these things will be covered in security operations, so I will again review it there. Intangible assets are intellectual assets, patent, copyrighted, market creation, all those things. We should also know that use patents are valid for 20 years. I think this I have already discussed in domain 1 as well. You can refer my past video. And the value of intangible assets are reported using generally accepted accounting principle, GAAP. I don't know what it entails, what is the detail of GAAP, but for CISSP we should know that if there is an intangible access, the evaluation or the how much dollar value it will have is calculated using something which is called GAAP. I think with this note, I will end the video, and uh, I will cover rest of the topic of domain 2, which is chapter 16 in Cybex 9th edition book, which is security operations. Basically, it will talk about a lot of things like least privilege, need to know, and configuration management. Some of the topics of ITIL will also be covered in chapter 16. I have not made any video for that one, so I will heavily rely on my iPad, real-time drawing, which I will do for that chapter. And with that note, I will end this video. If you really like this video, put a thumbs up, and you can share my video with your fellow friends who are preparing for CISSP, and best of luck for your CISSP exams.